The Chargers are the most questionable 2-1 team, I think, in the league right now. And yes, I say that confidently while wearing an Eagles hat. Despite seeing everything that Washington did on primetime Monday Night Football, it is very hard for me to talk myself into Washington traveling to Arizona and upsetting the Cardinals. I don't pick or bet on Eagles games because I have enough on the line already.
Friday football forecast. Recording from New York and Los Angeles, your hosts, Nicole Katz and Briana Klein, are emerging from the tunnel for this week's show. Another sports show is ready to broadcast to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Before we kick off, please leave us a podcast review and YouTube comment. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. Today on another sports show.
Nicole's still not feeling well this week, so you get Friday football forecast with me, and maybe I've sprinkled in a couple of surprise extra voiceover man moments this week. Like always in this Friday football forecast, we're going to talk through a ton of different NFL games, starting with our NFL game of the week. Then we look at our doormats, bottom of the league teams, predict some underdogs, and I nerd out to you about a defensive line, offensive line matchup to watch. And of course, every Friday football forecast show takes a trip to the college football corner where we talk about the college football game of the week, which is Georgia-Bama this week. So I break down who I think is going to win that game and all of the playoff implications that are going to come from a game this early in the season. As well as I give you which teams I think are most likely to be upset from the top 25 this week. Take it away, voiceover man.
It's another sports show, but it's not. Game of the week.
The game of the week is the Kansas City Chiefs at the Los Angeles Chargers. Do the Chargers have any chance of winning this game?
This might be a shocking game of the week choice. And if you're like, oh, she didn't pick insert game here, it's probably on the rundown for us to talk about later. But assuming that Herbert plays, and as of 5 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, September 25th, he was a limited participant in practice, and it looks like he's going to play. I do have a ton of questions and storylines I want to follow in this game. Let's start with Chargers, and we're going to talk assuming Herbert plays and that he plays well, because I think that is the more interesting angle to look at this game from instead of, will injuries affect them, etc. So the Chargers are 2-1, having beaten the Raiders in week 1 and the Panthers in week 2, and lost to what looks to be a really good Steelers team in week 3. At the very least, a very good Steelers defense. I think saying the Raiders and Panthers wins are them beating up on doormats would be even an understatement, but it is still the NFL. And the Chargers comfortably beating the Panthers, who did win in week 3, and comfortably beating the Raiders shows that there's a floor to this team that I don't know if Chargers teams have ever felt emotionally to me like they've had in the past. I think everyone knows that Herbert is a good quarterback. I think we all know that Harbaugh is a great coach. That doesn't mean they can magically work around all the talent on this team. And I was very suspect of the offensive line coming into this season. And if you've watched any other sports show content, you know that I will predict everything based around the performance of the lines on both sides of the ball. I think if you have a great offensive line, you can overperform your talent. I think if you have a really poor offensive line, you could make your all-star quarterback look mediocre at best. All of this being said, when I pulled the line for this game, and it was Chargers +8, that to me feels like a line with Herbert not playing. Because, one, I was about to be like, they are home, but do the Chargers have home games? They really don't. So maybe I'll throw that out. They're not home. It's probably going to be a Chiefs home game. The Chiefs have looked incredible, but they haven't looked like world beaters. And I think this is such an interesting game because it is a measuring stick game for the Chargers. Because even if the Chargers lose this game to the Chiefs, that, again, Vegas says that they have little to no chance of winning. But if they're close, if they can cover that spread, I think that collectively we all learn that this Chargers team is a actual playoff contender. Maybe not a Super Bowl contender, but this is a team that can and should make the playoffs this year. Versus if they get blown out by the Chiefs, I think there's an understanding that this team is just not ready to be in that upper echelon, no matter how good Herbert and Harbaugh are. Look on the Chiefs side of the ball, I mentioned that they haven't looked like world beaters. They've won all these games. They've played good teams. Week 3 was interesting because the easy overreaction is, why didn't Kelsey get the ball? What is going on with tight end, who shockingly once you get plus 30, like, you're going to look old and etc. I find it interesting with the Chiefs that the Chiefs could look sluggish for the first 10 games of the season, and they have historically found a way to just win games where they matter and turn it on. So we saw last year that their plan with Travis Kelce for most of the season was to manage snaps, get him to the playoffs, where Patrick Mahomes is really going to need him. So I'm not going to overreact and panic about the Travis Kelce of it all. That being said, this team is not going to go undefeated, and they definitely don't look like a team that's going to go undefeated. So I'm intrigued to watch them in going on the road, a division matchup. Do they slip? And do they slip against a Chargers team that might be better than original expectations were for them? That being said, while I'm intrigued to watch this game, I am picking the Chiefs if I had to pick them straight up. But if Herbert's starting and the line is still at 8, please give me the spread.
Hey, wipe your shoes on the doormat before coming inside.
Cincinnati Bengals at Carolina Panthers. Really, Briana? You're calling the Bengals a doormat team? Is the 0-win team that bad?
There were a lot of things about the NFL season that I will brag about that I called in our season preview. Cincinnati not being world beaters, I could say I called. I didn't think their defense improved year over year. I wasn't super scared. I think we had to see how Burrow came back from the injury. The Bengals being a participant in the doormat game of the week, the game where two bad teams are playing each other, for the Bengals-Panthers game, not something I expected to say week 4 of the season for an 0-3 Bengals team. The Bengals, to me, come down to that defense really doesn't look good. And Joe Burrow can't outplay a defense that can't stop anyone. So I'm actually excited for this week 4 matchup at the Panthers. The Bengals are 4.5-point favorites on the road against the Panthers, who did win a game starting Andy Dalton in week 3. But I think we all can collectively agree that this Panthers team is still really not good. This is the perfect get-right game for the Bengals. If the Bengals want to turn their season around, make a playoff push, I really don't think this is a Super Bowl team. I would be shocked. A lot would have to roll their way. 0-3 teams barely even make the playoffs. But this is, and when I say a get-right game, which is such a cliche, it's let's go out and beat up on a poor opponent, maybe score a ton of points. So if your defense lets Andy Dalton score a ton of points, it doesn't matter. This is the type of game to do that. But I have zero faith that they can. And this is definitely recency bias. But I'm going to pick the Panthers. They're at home. They're feeling confident. The Bengals look incredibly defeated. They're coming off a short week, playing on Monday Night Football. I think the Panthers can do it. I think the Panthers can pull off the upset for our doormat game of the week.
Hungry dogs run faster.
The undefeated Minnesota Vikings are 2.5-point underdogs at Green Bay. Coming off of an impressive Monday Night Football game, Washington is a 3.5-point underdog at the Arizona Cardinals. Which underdog team is more likely to complete the road upset?
Yes. The two games where there's definitely some post-week 3 going into week 4 overreactions. I do think Vegas is right with this one. I think Minnesota is much more likely to upset Green Bay than Washington is likely to upset Arizona. But after watching that Washington Commanders performance on Monday Night Football, I understand why this is a question. While what Green Bay did without Jordan Love in week 3 was impressive, I'm not quite sure how replicable it is now that there's a week of tape for Minnesota to study. And my big takeaway from week 3 was that Minnesota might be a real contender. And that's really being put to the test this week. Can their offense score in Lambeau against what is a really good Green Bay defense? But why I think this spread is unfair to Minnesota, it's essentially a toss-up because it's 2.5 points in favor of the home team, which is really what you just get from being home. But I still think that's unfair to Minnesota because Minnesota's defense has looked like one of the best defenses in the entire league. So I think Minnesota upset in Green Bay seems like a likely outcome. Washington upsetting Arizona. This is interesting to talk about because when a team goes on primetime and we all sit there and watch the game, and then a quarterback, particularly a rookie quarterback, puts on a performance like he did, it's going to be incredibly top of mind. And that's going to skew our feelings and perceptions of this. And I hear you. You're like, Briana, Arizona's 1-2. But Arizona's 2 losses are to the Bills and the Lions. And I'm not here saying Arizona, Super Bowl contender, definite playoff team. No. I just think Arizona has looked like a good team, particularly against other good teams. They went to Buffalo in week 1 and only lost by 6 points. They destroyed the Rams in week 2. And then they only lost by a touchdown to the Lions in week 3. So they've played 2 for sure Super Bowl contenders. And this week, they're home playing the Washington Commanders. I needed to remind myself as we ramped into the season as I watched football. Kyler Murray, very good at football. It's been a long time since he had really played football. He's playing football. He's good at football. Despite seeing everything that Washington did on primetime Monday Night Football, it is very hard for me to talk myself into Washington traveling to Arizona and upsetting the Cardinals. It is so much harder for me to do than talking myself into Minnesota upsetting Green Bay.
Let's tush the push. Let's push the tush. Let's tush the push. Let's push the tush. Let's tush the push. Let's push the tush.
The dominant, likely best in the NFL, Indianapolis Colts offensive line have their toughest test of the early season going up against TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line. Briana, who will control the line of scrimmage?
I have selfishly saved this matchup for this game. It's probably the game of the week, but I really wanted to get nerdy with you all about Pittsburgh's defensive line and Indy's best in the league offensive line. Because this is, as someone who nerds out about line play, this is the game, the matchup. Not to mention that both of these teams, like Pittsburgh 3-0 looks really good. Who knows if Richardson can become a mediocre quarterback, this Indy team is really built well around him. But we can talk about all of that. But no. I want to talk about Watt going up against this offensive line. All right, it's time for a segment called Briana Shows Her Favorite Graph that comes out every week. Ben Baldwin, or Computer Cowboy, fantastic follow. You know what? Let's take a quick detour. I want to do my podium of nerdy NFL follows on Twitter.
In P3.
The surrender index. I can't even begin to explain how this is more often than not a second screen viewing while watching football. If you are a fan of participating in the punt or go for it arguments, this is a must follow. Follow the surrender index.
In P2.
Baldy's breakdowns. If you're at the level of nerding out about football where I am, or even if you're just like a step below and you want to get up here, I don't personally break down my own film, but I could watch Baldy break down film for me forever. And there's other people too, but Baldy's breakdowns, incredible, fantastic, must watch in my opinion.
In P1.
And it probably makes a lot of sense because this is how I got onto this podium, but it is most definitely Ben Baldwin. He puts out the most incredible thread. If you like data, it is must scroll viewing, whatever that means, for any data fan of the NFL. Like, obsessed. Okay, so let's get back to one part of that massive thread he does, which is trench measurements. And I just want to zoom in on the offensive line side for pass protection and run block and where the Colts are. This unit is so good. I go back to Anthony Richardson needs to be an okay quarterback. Just an okay quarterback. That's it. Okay. So now let's look at the defensive side and look at where the Pittsburgh Steelers are. And we can attribute so much of this to what? A lot of people are going to look at the matchups and they're going to be like, this quarterback's going against this quarterback. No. Pittsburgh's defensive line, Indy's best in the league offensive line. I need to see who wins that matchup. Because I've been saying for weeks that the Colts are winning their offensive line matchups and still losing the game. We're only in week 4, and I feel like that trend's going to continue. I don't like betting against Pittsburgh in any circumstance, particularly against Watt and that defense and Tomlin's, the way he builds this defense, and it is drool-worthy. So I think the Pittsburgh's defensive line gets the betterment of Indy's offensive line. And if that's true, everyone needs to be on high alert for how good this Pittsburgh defensive line is, because if they can wreck Indianapolis, it can happen to any offensive line in the league and no one stands a chance. That being said, a reminder, if Anthony Richardson holds onto the ball for too long and maybe doesn't make good plays, they could still really lose this game. But I would tune in to the trenches.
Hey, click over to that game.
Nicole is not here to give you her switch away game. And for that reason, I'm going to give you mine. It's an obvious answer, but then we're going to move on quickly because guess what? The Eagles travel to the Bucs and they play in the morning window, which means that is exclusively what I'm going to be watching. There's not even going to be a secondary screen. I'm going to catch up on all the other games via highlights later. I'm watching the Eagles game with my family. That's all I'm doing. Also, normally I give analysis and predictions and things in this segment. No. Here's my prediction. My emotional stability is on the line for the Eagles game. I don't pick or bet on Eagles games because I have enough on the line already.
I hear you about the Eagles. Are there any afternoon games that we haven't discussed yet that might make you switch away from RedZone?
We've talked about most of the games that are happening in the afternoon window, but I wanted to touch on this game because the spread is bonkers to me. San Francisco is interesting to me right now. I don't think the team could be more injured unless Brock Purdy went down. This team is banged up. I don't understand it, but it feels like every other year, either San Francisco isn't injured and they're good and they make it to the Super Bowl, and then they're super injured. and then the next year, everything goes wrong. And then, they're healthy and they make it to the Super Bowl. And guess what? This year, it's everything is going wrong. It reminds me of, there was that stretch in baseball, and I know this is a football show, but there's that stretch in baseball where every even year the San Francisco Giants made it and won to the World Series. There was a 6-year stretch or something where the San Francisco Giants was it's an even year, so the Giants are going to be good. That is a random aside. Bringing it back. I think this New England-San Francisco game could be more interesting than the spread shows. I'm not sitting here thinking that New England can win this game, but with how good the New England defense is, how beat up San Francisco is, I could see a world where New England covers. 10 feels insane for almost any NFL game, and particularly this one.
College Football Corner.
It's the biggest college football game of both the week and the season so far. Georgia at Bama. Who wins?
Gosh, what a week for Nicole to miss. I can hear her screaming about Georgia-Bama because this feels like the first truly major game of the college football season. It is in conference. It is 2 top 4 teams. Georgia traveling to Bama, rivalry, so it's always a big deal. Georgia's favored by 2 points on the road. Georgia is the better team this year. They are arguably the best team in college football. But that doesn't mean this is a sure-in. So the fascinating thing about the college football playoffs and the way it works now, with so many teams making it, losing this game doesn't knock you out of the playoffs. But what I find fascinating about this is losing this game might knock you out of the bye. The way the byes work, the top 4 ranked conference champions get the bye. So even if we end the season, Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, that doesn't mean they both get byes. It means that Georgia won the SEC, Georgia gets the bye. And Alabama, despite being the 2 seed, is going to have to go play in that first round. And while we haven't seen this in college football yet, we have seen it in the NFL. Home field advantage buys matter so much when you have one football game to win. So while the stakes in college football have changed, I think the stakes in this game are still huge because they are likely to have massive implications down the line on who gets the easier path to the national championship. I hate to say it because I'm part of that generation that went to college when Bama was just so good it was annoying and infuriating, but I do think Bama pulls off the upset. I think being home matters.
Upset alert.
Which top 25 upset is more likely? UCLA versus number 8 Oregon, Stanford at number 17 Clemson, or Auburn versus number 21 Oklahoma?
I think Stanford over Clemson. Clemson is not good this year. I think they're highly likely to drop embarrassing losses with how not good they are this season. No. I'm going to chicken out, and I'm going to pick Auburn upsetting Oklahoma. Auburn's home. They're still an SEC school. I'm going with that. Yeah.
It's time for the final buzzer.
In case you missed it this week, the Bills apparently have started to do a crowd sing-along of Mr. Brightside, and some of the players really got into it last week. Chargers rookie first-round pick Joe Out has strained his MCL and is likely to at least miss one game. Sean McVay has announced that Cooper Kupp will not be returning this week for the Rams. I feel like every week in the final buzzer I have to give you the 49ers injury report, and it's a new collection of people, so let's run through it. So it looks like defensive tackle Hargrave suffered a partial triceps tear and is likely out for the rest of the season. Brock Purdy has back soreness, and I feel bad that I put out in the universe like everyone seems fine except Purdy, and then I went to pull the injury report for the 49ers, which is something I have to do for the final buzzer for the show every week now, and because they have so many injuries, and I was like, oh, okay. And apparently Christian McCaffrey is still really far away from returning, so much so he's going to see an Achilles specialist. Important football adjacent news. Do you remember the Pop-Tart mascot from the college football bowl game last season? If you don't, I don't know how you forgot about this moment because it was the moment of the season. Well, you can now be said eaten Pop-Tart for Halloween. And I need all of us, while Nicole is not on this week's show, to figure out in the comments how we can get Nicole to do this, because this is the most Nicole Katz thing I've ever seen. She needs to be a Pop-Tart for Halloween.
Thank you for listening to another sports show. Thank you to our co-creators, Nicole Katz and Briana Klein. Thank you to the four-legged executive producers and me, Voiceover Man. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Make our day by leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice and a comment on YouTube. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. We'll be back to review the playbook every week. See you next Tuesday.
Today was another sports show, but it did not hold back its excitement for offensive and defensive lines.